Hey everyone, my name is Dan and I'm here to talk to you about why you should choose Beckett Grading System over PSA for grading Pokemon TCG cards. So the first thing I want to talk about is a slab. This is a PSA slab. You see Charizard here in the middle. On the right hand side you see a close-up of the same image. The first thing is there's no internal sleeves. So as you can see, not all cards will fit exactly in every slab because there's always a very slight cut differentiation between every card. That's just a normal output of manufacturing. So as you can see, there's a space on the right hand side of this card and there's no space on the bottom. No surprise. Well, if you pick up, you hold the slab, you move it around, you ship it, the mailman handles it, that card's going to be moving around inside that slab and it's going to be damaging your edges over time. Now, granted, the damage will probably be minimal because there's very little movement, but it still happens. And over time, you could take a perfect card and turn it into a not so perfect card. And you can also hear an audible rattle sometimes. I've had cards where I've purchased off of eBay, I received them, and I can just kind of jiggle it in my hand and hear a rattle, and that bothers me, just knowing that I'm damaging the card. The other big factor is subgrades. There is no subgrades. There is a single grade at the top of the card. You get a 1 through 10 rating, essentially. If we look at the Beckett slab, the key differences, right? It has a lot of the same things. It has a single grade. It has, a name, a label, whatever. The key differences is the internal sleeve. The internal sleeve keeps the card immobile and prevents it from hitting those edges, preventing damage. It's not 100% chance, right? But it's much lower. Think of it like putting a penny sleeve inside of another holder. You always put the card in the penny sleeve before you put it into a hard plastic holder. Why? Because you don't want it to slide around and scratch and damage the card. And then you also get subgrades with Beckett, which is really nice. You see on the front of this Charizard, there's 4 9.5s. So you can see why the overall grade of a 9.5 was given. And that kind of leads us into our next piece. Why are subgrades important? Who cares? Well, what we have here is an excerpt from the PSA population report. As you can see, we have 3,900 PSA 9 Charizards and 388 PSA 10 Charizards, right? Let's think about that. Are all 3,900 Charizards worth the same amount of money or value? If you only have one grade, then yes, there's no way to differentiate them. We are not custom inspectors of cards as consumers. But imagine if all those 3,900 PSA Charizards or those 388 PSA 10 Charizards had subgrades. You would certainly have variation in value now, and now you could definitely put your card against other collectors' cards to see who's worth more. A card that received, the 4 subgrades of a 9, a 9.5, a 9.5, and another 9 would certainly be worth more value than someone else's card who maybe had subgrades of a 9, an 8.5, a 9.5, and then a 9. So by having more diversity in the market and having those differentiating factors, it helps build the value and the health and the stability of the economy for collectors. And really, this economy should be about collectors, not about sellers. People who are making money off of other people for Pokemon cards, like sure, that's great that you're there and that helps build the environment, but the economy should really be geared towards collectors. Those are the people who are in it for the love of the hobby and not just to make a profit. Next thing I want to talk about is with BGS has a harsher grading scale. So let's just kind of look at these population reports. So with PSA, there's 388 PSA 10 base and limited Charizards, 4% of the population. And there's 3,900 PSA 9, which is 41% of the population. Now, for those 2 grades, Beckett has 4 different categories that PSA only has 2 categories for. They have a black label, which means every subgrade was a 10. It's essentially a pristine, perfect card. As you can see right now, there are 0 black label Charizards. There is 1 Beckett Grading System 10 Charizard, which is only 0.17% of the population. There's 118 9.5s which is a grade that PSA typically doesn't do. And there's 208 nines. So you can see there's a little more diversity, and that helps the really truly worthy cards from being differentiated from the less worthy. Imagine what that one BGS 10 unlimited Charizard is worth compared to a PSA 10 Charizard, right? The fact that there's 4% of the population is PSA 10s, it just kind of devalues the card almost. So from a collector standpoint, if you're sending your card to get graded, you don't want to have a card that's like everybody else's. You want to have a card that's better than everyone else's. Imagine how many of those PSA 10 Charizards, if they had been graded by Beckett, would maybe be a 10 in a Beckett, or even maybe the one and only Black Label 10, right? Imagine how much that would skyrocket the value of your card. And we see this if you look at eBay auctions and you kind of go through auctions sold. PSA 10s typically sell for less than BGS 10s. And a BGS 10 Black Label is always worth way more than a PSA 10 equivalent. So really it comes down to the collector. A lot of times people send cards to PSA because they have quick turnaround time and they have a stronger community. It's really, PSA is for sellers, and BGS or BGS in my opinion is really for collectors. And really the market should be about the collector. The next factor is kind of pricing and wait times. Like I kind of got into before, PSA has shorter wait times, but they have higher prices. Their prices actually scale based off of the value of the card, whereas in BGS they don't. PSA has subscriptions required for bulk grading services, whereas BGS doesn't. So if you're grading a couple cards, they're both almost pretty much equivalent as long as they're kind of low value. If you're grading, like a handful of cards, BGS is going to be a little bit cheaper. And in PSA, especially when you're grading a higher value card, let's say you want to go get that first edition Charizard graded, you're going to pay a lot more money than you would if you had done BGS. So PSA does have some advantages over BGS. The biggest really is the community, because PSA is the standard. Everyone buys and sells PSA cards, which means there's a higher demand, and the sellers are going to meet that demand with a higher supply by taking the cards that they think are going to be graded well and they can resell and make a profit on. They're going to send it to PSA every time because the market demands PSA. PSA also has more consistent grading for lower grade cards. So if you're sending a card in that you think is going to be a 6, a 7, or 8, maybe it has value to you, then you're going to get more consistency, less variance, which in terms of grading is considered better. Now, when we talk about 9s and up, right, 9, 9.5, 10, Black Label 10, BGS has a much better system, in my opinion. You can see all the subgrades, you can see why it is what it is, and then you also have confidence in knowing that if you have a 10, very few other people have a 10. Whereas with PSA, 10s are kind of handed out with like hotcakes almost. And then the last thing is PSA doesn't have these oddball grading packages like BGS does. They have a thing called BCCG, which is meant to be like a bulk grading where less time is taken with the card. It's just kind of like a quick, easier grading scale. Because that exists, it kind of causes confusion and people don't really understand the difference between BCCG versus BGS, the standard service. So there's a little more stability with PSA. So final remarks, really my message at the end of this is I would like for people to stop buying PSA graded cards. And really it comes down to, because we want the market to be for collectors and we don't want the market to be for sellers and resellers. PSA favors sellers and resellers because they have shorter turnaround times, they have stronger communities, and they have consistent lower grades. BGS benefits collectors by having higher slab qualities and card protection. We have harsher grading scales, which helps us differentiate our cards amongst each other, increases value for the cards that actually deserve that higher value, and it helps keep the market and economy diverse and strong. So if your goal is to buy a card that has some sort of value to you and put it on your shelf, and maybe even in your mind know that it's going to grow in value as time goes on, because more and more cards are going to be destroyed just out of randomness, and you want your card value to grow, then getting your card graded by BGS is actually better for you, because you have a chance at having that rarer grade than what PSA turns around with, kind of throwing out 9s and 10s left and right. So hey, thanks for your time. I appreciate it, and just consider in the future, consider BGS over PSA when you do your next grading submission. Thanks.